in the last few weeks I have been going through various tier lists of various Pokemon, things like that. So I decided today, even though everything that I'm about to say is probably going to change tomorrow when Blissey comes out, I'm going to go ahead and rate what I think of all the Pokemon that are in Unite. I have played most of them when they were on free rotation. There are a few I haven't, but I've seen enough other people play them that I have a general idea where they fit as far as good or bad. At least in the area that I'm at. I'm in great class right now. I'm not expert or master or anything. Not including Blastoise or apparently Clefairy, because neither of those are in the game currently. I know Blastoise was in the beta. I guess Clefairy was Clefable, not Clefairy. But I'm not including those because they're not currently in the game. So, say Crustal is right here at A. Because if you get a Crustal on your team that knows what they're doing, you're not guaranteed to win, but you almost are guaranteed to win. If you have a Crustal that knows what they're doing. Rock Tomb becomes a huge problem for a lot of people. If your goal is as Crustal is to be picking where the team fights are going to happen, and Crustal is one of the few tanks that can really do that really well. So, and then he can actually put out quite a bit of damage right now too with I forget what X-Scissor? Yeah, he has X-Scissor as his other ability. If you go the default route, that's probably the best route, honestly. Stealth Rock is cool, but it's not, like, it doesn't seem to affect it quite as much as him just dishing out massive damage. So, I mean, if you have Rock Tomb, there's not really a reason to take Stealth Rock, in my opinion. But if you have Rock Tomb and X-Scissor, you can start causing some crazy havoc. He's not S because he can't carry the entire game on his own. Snorlax is right here underneath. He's right where he should be. If you want to learn how to tank in this game, this is pretty much what you should be using, because he's bulky, he takes damage pretty well, he has abilities that let him regenerate health. He has block, which is probably the only ability aside from Rock Tomb that can really mess somebody up. That the tanks have, I should say. There's a support that has a similar ability. I'll get to him in a minute. But as far as tanks go, these are the two you should be using most of the time. If you're not confident in Crustal, use Snorlax. Snorlax is still really good. He does decent amount of damage, but his bulk is really the reason why you pick Snorlax. Has sleep also, which can be a pain in the butt. I would recommend either build going on Snorlax. Block build is usually what I go with. Slowbro. If I was rating him as a tank, he'd go down here. And the reason for that is, even though he has a fair amount of health and he has some stuff that he can use to abuse people, he's not really good at doing what a tank does, which is messing with the enemy team in order to, set up a good team fight. Snorlax doesn't really do that. The best thing it can do is the thing where he stuns them, but he's stunned at the same time. So when that happens, pretty much ignore Slowbro while he's doing that, unless the person that he captured happens to be somebody important. As far as a tank is concerned, he's not terribly good. Now, using him like a bruiser type all-arounder, who, gets in there, does a bit of damage, just harasses the enemy team, he's actually not bad. So I'd say he's actually pretty good on a team. He's just not very good on a team as a tank. So if he was classified as something else, I'd put him here. I'd have to see how well that works. He's better if somebody else is tanking, like doing the actual physical, getting in between people and moving stuff around so that you can have a good team fight. So he's actually more of a support than he is a tank. He's like a really beefy support, is what it seems more like. The fact that he's ranged also isn't helping his cause any. So if he was reclassified, I'd say he might actually even be up here. But he's definitely not, you know, top tier anything. And as a tank, he's way down here. So don't use Slowbro as a tank. I know I had put out a video that said this is the one that you get for free. There's a reason it's free. So we'll do supports next, because the coloration on this particular tier list shows Wigglytuff as a tank, not a support. Because Wigglytuff is kind of the weirdest of the supports. Wigglytuff relies more on debuffs and interrupts. So she's very similar to Slowbro in that she's more of a harasser. She actually does that job a lot better because she's usually in people's faces. So she's not very good as a solo support. She's not going to be healing anybody. She's mostly there just to debuff people and cause havoc. So in Hot's term, she's kind of like a bruiser almost. Except she has a lot more crowd control and a lot less damage. So I find it interesting that this particular tier list lists her as a defender, because she almost is. She has a lot of health, so she could almost be a defender. But as it stands, she's more of a support, just because she's kind of wonky. So it's fun playing as her, but you have to have a certain kind of team in order to make Wigglytuff work. Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime's okay. He also does not heal people. Instead, he puts up barriers, is his primary thing. And he has another build that does other stuff. But the barriers is what you really get Mr. Mime for. It's similar to Block. The difference is that it just puts up a wall, whereas Block will actually knock people away if they run into it. Slightly different. So he can be used if you have like a Wigglytuff and a Slowbro on your team. So if you have a front line that's not necessarily very tanky, he can actually come in handy, because he can at least impede people's movement. So you can set up a barrier in between two enemies, so that one of them's singled out and let your damage dealers deal with them. So that's kind of fun. He's a little tricky to use, and he's not going to win games by himself most of the time, but he's okay. I think he's alright. He's in a pretty good place right now. Eldegoss, of course, is S-Class. If you have an Eldegoss on your team, you're already winning. Eldegoss is the only Pokemon right now that can actually heal your team. It has multiple ways to do it. And if it, for whatever reason, you don't really need the healing, the other build is all movement speed based. So, or you can do a little bit of both. I've occasionally swapped out Pollen Puff for the Tornado in order to get away when I have a team full of squishies. Just because I want the ability to escape quickly. Everything goes to heck because nobody's playing tank, nobody's playing anything with any amount of health. I want to get out of dodge as fast as possible. So I usually go with that, at least Tornado, whenever that happens. So if the opposing team doesn't have an Eldegoss, they have to have a high damage team, and the rest of Eldegoss's team has to be really bad. So for a while I was sitting on like a 75% win rate with Eldegoss. That's gone down in the last week and a half or so. I think a lot of people are starting to figure out, well, if you target the Eldegoss, it goes down pretty quick, which is true. So once you get higher and higher into ranks, they start figuring it out. Yeah, it's still at the early levels of ranks. If you have an Eldegoss on your team, you're already winning. I'm going to do the mages next because they are the largest group. I refer to these characters as mages because they're basically sitting back throwing magic at people. That's their job. Venusaur is a terrible mage because it doesn't do a heck of a lot of damage. It doesn't do any good AoE damage. It doesn't have any abilities that impede the enemy that much. And the only thing that seems to have any, advantage over some of the other mages is that it's a little bit bulkier. And by that I mean it's slightly more health and it's bigger, which makes it a bigger target. None of that really helps. Venusaur needs some help. I don't know what they need to do to fix it. Venusaur is just not very good. Now I have one with Venusaurs on my team in various modes. So it's not as though Venusaur is terrible, horrible, you should never pick it. But you have a lot of better options most of the time. So Pikachu I think is perfectly fine where it is. It doesn't need to be super powerful. It can get super powerful if you let it. It's fairly easy to use. He teaches you a lot about positioning. So, and on top of that, he just has a smattering of abilities that can be used in different situations. So I really think he's in a good place. Nobody should touch him as far as the developers are concerned. Because Pikachu, I think, is in the perfect spot for a new player to just get in and go. He's not going to win the game outright by himself, but no Pokemon should do. And actually, I think Cinderace is kind of that way too. So, at least from what I've seen, Cinderace is very similar in that regard. In that he's in a really good place right now. He's still mostly about damage, whereas Pikachu has a couple of like crowd control things that he can do. Cinderace doesn't have that as much. Glass cannon type character. So, and he has like the longest range of most of these characters, so he can actually sit there and fight Zapdos without taking any hits because he can hit him so far. So, okay, maybe adjust that. Otherwise, he's fine. So maybe make some slight adjustments to Cinderace and he's fine. So Cramorant is also. I've seen some good Cramorants. I haven't seen Cramorant that often actually. So I almost can't dare to say I can't really talk about him too much. Because I've seen some good ones on YouTube anyway. And I have played with one or two that were okay. So I can't really judge where he is exactly. So I'm guessing he's somewhere in here in terms of, in terms of damage and everything. He seems fine. So I don't really have any strong opinions on him, but I'm pretty sure he's in a pretty good place. Greninja I haven't seen a lot of either. Probably right about here. He's a little more trickery than these two, so he's a little harder to use. So that might make him down here. I don't know. I haven't played enough Greninja to really know for sure. He has a lot of tricky abilities that make, particularly the mirror image thing, which throws people off. Despite the fact that, one of them has the actual health bar and the other two just have really tiny. It's still enough trickery for low-level ranked or intermediate ranked like me to get messed up by. So, I mean, so I'll just leave him here. Irontails would be here in the perfectly fine category, except for the fact that I figured out after playing Ninetales a few times is that you can play Ninetales as a support if you really want to. It has enough abilities that you can get a stun, you can get a pushback, you can get a wall, you can get all sorts of stuff with an Alolan Ninetales. So if you're lacking a support, this isn't a bad pick. With an Eldegoss, it's an even better pick. Gardevoir just does not stand out very much right now. I'm really never sure what to do with a Gardevoir on my team yet. And that might be a testament to the fact that it's the newest of them. This one remains to be seen, and it does depend on how other things shake out with some of these others, but I'm just not sure how to feel about Gardevoir, and I really would like to play Gardevoir, but I just haven't had an opportunity yet. Let's just jump to our assassins. I call the speedsters assassins because that's what their actual job is. They run around the jungle, get a whole bunch of experience, and then jump in on people who are just sitting there picking their noses. So Zorora, I think it's fine. It's a little harder to use than some of the kind of wonky abilities. Gengar is about the same way. Gengar can really mess your day up because he can teleport. He can like walk away and then teleport back and do all this funky stuff. So it's really, really, really annoying. Talonflame could use some work. I'm not to the point where I think Talonflame is terrible, but I've seen Talonflames do some stuff that is helpful to the team sometimes. It's just that I don't think they're very good at their particular job. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it has 3 evolutions, although Gengar does it just fine. He has 3 forms too, so I don't know what exactly the difference is here. I just know that most of the time if I have a Gengar or a Zorora on the team, they're more likely to get a lot more done than Talonflames are. I don't know if that's the people who are playing the Talonflame or if it's built into the Talonflame itself. So Absol is the only one that I would rank up here. Gengar comes pretty close because he's easier to use, but because he has 3 forms, I think it makes it a little harder. Absol has everything you need to be a decent assassin right from the get-go. The only downside is that in the late game, he starts getting hammered by other... You have to be really careful with Absol, but if you run into an Absol that knows what they're doing, they completely annihilate your team. And if they get a level lead and they just start killing people left and right, it's done. Doesn't matter if you have an Eldegoss. So that almost puts him up here, but he's still down here because it's not exactly the easiest role to play appropriately. I'll put it that way. Because you can't just sit there and grind the jungle forever. You got to come out and participate in a team fight or stop a team fight from happening by just picking somebody off. So, one or the other. Alright, I put it off long enough. So the all-arounds, which they all vary so much in what they're actually supposed to do. Charizard, I don't think it's terrible. I don't think he's garbage. But he's kind of a pseudo-mage. He's like a medium-range mage with a lot more health. He's kind of like Venusaur. Except his range is smaller. He has some melee abilities. He has basically a flamethrower at the late game. So, he can be good, but a lot of it depends on, what the rest of his team composition looks like. Garchomp is kind of the same way. I don't think Garchomp is any better than Charizard. He's probably about the same. He just has different tools, and he is much more melee focused than Charizard. So I guess Charizard is, if you've played mages before and want to try something that has a little bit more bulk and health, you go with Charizard. If you play assassins, then you go with Garchomp, because Garchomp's a little more assassin-y. Lucario is much better than either of them, I think. And I think he's better to start off with, honestly, even though you really only want to use the default build if you're starting out with him. Because the other one's really hard to use. You have to do extreme speed at just the right timing. to get the right damage off, so it's kind of hard. Not the easiest of them to use by far, but I think learning how these guys are supposed to operate, this is the one that makes the most sense. He has a decent amount of bulk. He has a decent amount of damage. He can chase people down if they try to get out of a team fight, like that. So, and he has enough bulk that he can sit there and score points without worrying about getting himself killed too quickly. The downside is, of course, he only has one form, so other Pokemon will start getting bigger and nastier forms later that he has to contend with. So, Machamp, I think, is right here too. I really want to play him again. I played him on free rotation a little bit, and I wasn't really quite sure what to make of him. I hadn't played very many of the all-arounders yet. After I played Lucario, I started to understand what you're supposed to be doing with them, and now I think I understand how Machamp's supposed to work. So I really want to go back and play him again, because he might actually be better than I'm thinking. And doing some research, I found out that his biggest weakness is the fact that he has trouble catching up to people. And that's a pretty big weakness, but I mean, this is why I need to play him a little more, because if he's kicking butt, if he can get in all the time, then yeah, that's a significant weakness, but it's an appropriate one. So he's obviously a bruiser type character because he has a slightly larger health pool, but he's definitely more assassin-y than, say, Lucario or Charizard are. So Garchomp is kind of assassin-y too, but yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I don't know how this compares to an actual pro's opinion. This is just what I've witnessed and how I have been encountering things as I've played along. So I've actually fell out of it in the past few days trying to get other stuff done. So I'm gonna have to jump in on it and see how Blissey plays. If she's absolute garbage. My only hope is maybe I can get away from playing Eldegoss for a while because everybody will want to play this. That's my only hope right now. So, getting ready to do his thing.